Hello and welcome to the Terp Family Fundamentals webinar series. My name is Danielle Walker and I'm the Program Coordinator in the Office of Parent and Family Affairs. For those of you that are joining us for the first time, this webinar series is intended to help you become informed consultants of on-campus resources. If you remember our office's presentation orientation, we like to say that during the normal course of events, there is no problem that can arise at the University of Maryland that a student cannot solve using the many resources available to them here. Hopefully you've registered for this webinar because your student will be moving to campus in a few short weeks, and you want to gain the tools and resources to help them be a good roommate. Today we are joined by Glenn Smith, Kalina Walker, and Raymond Ward, all from the Department of Resident Life. Tracy Curis is also here to help us answer your questions. Please feel free to submit questions throughout the presentation, and we will do our best to respond to those questions before the end of the webinar. With that, I hand off the presentation.
All right, hi everyone. I'd like to introduce myself. I'm Carlina Walker and I am a resident director on campus. Specifically, I am in the Leonardtown community, which is our garden style apartments. I'll be entering my 7th year as resident director of that area this fall.
And I am Ray Ward. I am a resident director in South Campus Commons, which is our apartment style situations here at Maryland. And I've been here for 8 years now.
All right, so we'd like to give an overview of the time that we'll spend today. We have quite a bit of information that will help you help your students. And so in terms of our objectives, we have 5. One, we want to help you understand the Maryland residential experience and what that means for your students who are living on campus. We also want to help you understand how you can engage with your student as they prepare to live with a roommate on campus. We'll also be providing some resources that you and your family can use in the case that any conflicts arise so that you can best support your student and they can best support themselves in navigating that. We also want to help you understand the process that we have and the policies that exist around mediating roommate conflicts that arise for our students in the residence halls. And lastly, we want to help understand and clarify the role of the student, the role of our resident assistants on campus, as well as the role of resident directors with regard to handling any conflicts that might arise while they live in our halls.
And with that, I'd like to give an overview of the Maryland residential experience. As you can see on your screen, we house 12,000 students in our halls across a variety of living styles, including traditional halls, suites, semi-suites, and apartments. Staff is available 24/7 to help residents access all resources they may need. This includes a resident assistant on duty, a resident director on duty, community director, and associate director. One thing we'd like to encourage for all of our students on campus is to follow our community living principles. That is being safe, being civil, being cooperative, and being involved. To give even more specifics to these situations, we have over 9,000 beds on campus, and the vast majority of them mean that your student will have at least one other roommate. They range from double rooms with one roommate all the way to triples and quads, which, as you can imagine, means 2 or 3 other people living in the same room as your student. And all of this supports the idea that Maryland is a very large and very diverse institution with students from a variety of backgrounds. You can see that over 12,000 students call us home, and that they are all from vastly different backgrounds. They come from 45 states, the District of Columbia, and 48 different countries, meaning that your student will probably live with someone whose background is different from your own.
All right, so we want to shift gears a bit and talk about how you can best prepare your student to live on campus. We use what are called the 3 C's in order to help them adjust and prepare. The first C will be contact. We want your student to reach out to their potential roommate, or at this point they are confirmed, in advance of moving here. We want to help ensure that you don't walk into the room with your belongings on that first day and feel like you will be meeting with a stranger. So your contact will be meant to connect with them ahead of time using email and phone and other means in order to build a rapport that you'll use to strengthen that relationship throughout the year. Communicate is meant to communicate several times if possible before your move-in day. This could include emails, phone calls. It could also mean meeting in person if you have the physical ability to do that. If you're out of state, that may not be an option. But certainly communicating several times will be really important. We also want to recognize that most of our students have not shared a bedroom before. In fact, about 75% of our residents haven't shared a bedroom before moving on campus. So doing so now may present some challenges, but successful roommate relationships really will hinge on good communication. Doing this ahead of time will set your students off on a good foot and really give them some good groundwork to develop before they move in that they can continue building on throughout the year where they're living together. We also want to ensure that compromise is an idea that you all are thinking about now and that you as parents can really highlight to your students before they move on campus. One of the key things to understand is that to have a good roommate, one must be a good roommate. And so there are a lot of ways that you can initiate this idea with compromise. The most basic of that being packing light in terms of when you first come to campus. You will want your student to talk to their roommate and understand who will bring what shared expectations they may have for their living space, and how they can collaborate to make sure that their room is a space that they're both comfortable in and can thrive in.
The first step in utilizing the 3 C's is to be proactive. As you just heard, the majority of students who come to live here have not had a roommate before, they've not shared space before. And so you should talk with your student about what it means to have a roommate and how that is different from their home situation. You should have a conversation with them about their expectations and their thoughts on how they'll manage a variety of different things, including sharing space and setting boundaries. Given that they will be in this room with their beds and their desks and such with another person for the entirety of the academic year. You should also encourage your students to address and communicate concerns when they arise, rather than letting those problems sit with them for weeks or for months, as many students often do. And encourage your student to address the root of the problem, understanding that sometimes the difference is just in backgrounds, whether someone comes from a large family or a small family or any other background that can contribute to how they choose to live in and share their space with others. Now, we know that these conversations many students are having for the very first time, and they should anticipate some possible discomfort. However, it is important to understand that on every floor, in every stack, in every area, there is a resident assistant who is available to help your student and their roommates adjust to any conflict that they have and mediate any issues that arise.
Okay. So I mentioned earlier making an introduction and how important that will be for your student to establish a good relationship with their roommate. Your student should have received their housing assignment. If they haven't, that will be coming soon. So we really do recommend that they contact their roommate via email to introduce themselves. There are some pieces of advice that we have around this. The first being, we ask that you don't research them on social media accounts. One, this will only show a small portion of who that roommate is. So it's important to know that if you do look at these accounts, you shouldn't make assumptions about who this person is or what their interests are or how they will present as a roommate. It's just one sliver of what they have chosen to put online, but they are a much more robust person than that can represent. We also want you to recognize that not everyone has a social media account, or it may be private, so that may not be a reliable source of information ahead of time. We do recommend that you ask about meeting up, as I mentioned before, if it's possible. Sometimes location prevents that, but if you have an opportunity to meet face-to-face for even a few minutes, it may make some of those first day nerves go away because you know the person ahead of time. It's really going to be key that you discuss what items each roommate will bring, because again, you'll be sharing a finite amount of space, so any kind of storage will be at a premium, but also remember that your student doesn't have to bring their entire room with them. It's really important to pack light that first go around so that they can get a chance to understand how they will live in their space, what things they actually need, and what items they may need later. But in that introduction conversation, you all can broach those topics. So how many TVs do you need in that space? Maybe you just need one. If you're going to bring an ironing board, do you need one? Do you need multiples of items? So this initial introduction will be really key in setting the tone and making sure that you bring just what's needed so that the students can be comfortable in that space. As mentioned before, it's really important to talk about preferences in the room and recognize that there will have to be compromises. Some of these will be around basics about decorations, but this will mean long-term thinking about the temperature of that space as the seasons change. And so we will be fairly warm in Maryland in August, but as we go through the fall semester, we will end it with cooler weather. So you want to have your student engaged in some of those conversations ahead of time so that they can prepare accordingly. We recognize also that your students may not understand or have a good sense of what they want to talk about ahead of time. So we have a list of the suggested questions available on our website. So I recommend that you look through the resources that we provide at the end of this presentation to give you a good jumping board for that. But some potential questions can include, why did you choose to come to Maryland? Have you chosen a major? What do you do for fun? What clubs are you planning to join? And what are your top 5 favorite movies? This introduction doesn't have to be all business. Again, you'll be living, your student will be living with this person all year. So it's really a good opportunity to get to know them as a person.
Okay, and step number 3 is to be solution-oriented. By this, we mean to focus not just on what bothers the student, but on what steps can be taken to resolve the conflict and move forward with their relationship. In doing this, we would ask that you encourage your student to talk to their roommate directly in person, not text. I can tell you from personal experience that using sticky notes, using text or GroupMe's is not the best way to broach conflict and not the best way to go about resolving conflict. When they do have this face-to-face conversation, encourage your student to use I statements and non-accusatory language. It is very important to focus less on the action itself and more on how whatever happened made them feel or what it made them think, so that the other person that they're having the conflict with can understand where they are coming from. In doing so, both students should try to listen and understand the other person's perspective, which is essential in making accommodations for the other person and compromising to find a solution that benefits everyone and contributes to a positive living environment. We also ask that you contain the issue to the students directly involved and not involve people who are not parties to the conflict, which will only make everything worse. And we mentioned before about researching your roommates on social media. It's also important to avoid channeling your emotions through social media for 2 primary reasons. It is very common for people who live together to follow each other on social media platforms, and so they will see what is being written about them in a variety of formats. And also, as your student goes through Maryland, they will inevitably become friends with people who are friends with their roommates. And venting their frustration on social media does not lead to positive, productive conversations in the future. But this is why we have resident assistants on the floor. Your student is always welcome to find either their RA on their floor or the RA on duty to help them with advice or assistance for anything that they need. That RA will probably suggest that they look at their community living agreement and amend it as needed so that they can find rules that everyone can live with and abide by for the duration of their time together. And in the extreme occurrence that something happens, there's always additional support that can be garnered from the resident director of that building or community.
Okay, so I just want to remind all of our attendees that you can send in any questions that you have in the chat box so that those can get responded to in a timely fashion. So I'm going to shift a bit and talk more about ways that you as parents can support your students. As mentioned before, conflict will happen. It is normal. It is very much a part of the learning process for students. And so we recognize that there is a connotation that conflict can be negative, but it's also a great learning experience and opportunity for your student to grow. So in terms of what you can do to help, we really want you to empower your student to advocate for themselves with our staff. We've mentioned that we have resident assistants who are on call every day. We have resident directors who are available to support your students. And so there really are a wealth of resources that they can avail themselves of if they find that they're engaging in a conflict with their roommate. We want you to be a good listener to your student. Certainly you care about them and you want to see them thrive. And so your role as someone who cares and wants to hear what's going on with them will be really important. When you're listening, it's also helpful to suggest strategies that your student can use to address their concerns. So sometimes you may be hearing issues from them, and they may just want to hear your listening ear, but other times they may also want some advice on how they can proceed. So being able to give some helpful strategies will be very valuable, but it really is important to encourage your student to take some of the ownership in terms of developing a solution. And sometimes that will be with starting with our staff. As mentioned before, it's really important to encourage a student to address issues immediately so that they don't fester, and that they can really focus on the things that they need to focus on, which will be their academics, their personal growth, and other priorities that they may have. So the more quickly we can address any issues that arise with your roommates, the quicker that we can work with those students to develop a solution that works for all of the people involved. Again, we want to really focus on keeping the conflicts limited to the people who are directly impacted. So that means if there are roommates involved, we want to limit it to the roommates who are directly involved or impacted. This may play a different role if you're in a space that has 4 people and the primary conflict is with 2. So when you're talking to your students, really encourage them to work to resolve the issue with the person or persons it actually directly involves. And that also means for parents, maybe taking a step back and really allowing the student to advocate for themselves and communicate directly with the people that they have a conflict with. As I mentioned, conflict mediation and compromise are really great learning opportunities. These will be lifelong skills that your students will use, whether it's in their personal relationships or in their professional lives. So there may be some hesitance in terms of engaging in conflict and accepting it as an inevitable part of their experience, but we know that realistically they may encounter some conflict when they're adjusting to living with a new person in a shared space, but the conflict might also arise outside of the classroom in other ways. So we really want to be supportive of the students, and so we really encourage you to make sure that they're advocating for themselves and contacting staff so that we can support them best.
Okay, and now we're going to talk about community living agreements. While every student is required to live by the rules of the University of Maryland and the Department of Resident Life, they're also free to craft specific living agreements for their space that each roommate will have to abide by. There are multiple questions in this living agreement that will give them an idea to consider ways to live with each other they may not have thought of before. This includes communication. What steps would they take to communicate and how they will resolve disagreement or conflict? We know that everyone has a different communication style, and it is in this section that every student can vocalize what works best for them, given their background, their temperament, their preferences in talking to others, and other things. There's also a space to talk about what methods they will use to communicate if this agreement is not being followed. This can include the formation of maybe a room-specific group me, group text, time set aside in the room to talk about issues and various things. There are also a section discussing cooperation. We know there are students who are going to come in and they believe that everything that they have can be shared by their roommates, and they will also want to use everything of their roommates. It is here that students can express exactly what they are comfortable sharing and what they are not. They can also talk about whether they are an early riser, someone who stays up all night, someone who likes to have their television on when they sleep or play music. Do they like to have guests in the space before class, after class? How late can guests be allowed to stay in the room? While there are rules that govern these things, there are also specific rules that your student can add, including exact times that guests can stay, whether they need roommate permission to come in, and anything else. There is a specific section, especially on cleaning, and what clean means to the student, there's also an opportunity to set a cleaning schedule that dictates when someone takes out the trash, whether there's alternating cleaning the bathroom, if they're in an area that has a bathroom that is in the room and not the hallway bathrooms, who would do the cleaning and when. There are sections on safety and civility. They will cover how you, like when you lock the door, how you keep your space and everything secure and safe. And also there's an area where they can talk about issues of their background that affect how they live together, whether this requires time for them to pray on a daily basis or whether they keep kosher or other restrictions. It is in this agreement that they can talk about it and have things shared with their roommates. There are a variety of open-ended questions in the community living agreement that will help each student understand the background and perspective of the students so that everyone understands exactly what it takes to live together as positively as possible.
All right, just another point to add about community living agreements. These are really a tool of prevention. They can't account for every kind of situation that might arise when your student's living with their roommate, but we really hope that they are a tool to engage in some conversations ahead of time to avoid some conflicts down the road. The CLAs, as we call them, are living documents, so they can be changed throughout the year. And as I go through talking about the roommate process, you'll see how this can play out. So if a student finds themselves in a conflict with a roommate, it really is important that if they don't feel that they can handle this on their own, that they reach out to our resident assistants as a first step in terms of addressing the conflict and moving forward. So on our end, we expect that RAs, after they've heard from one or more roommates about a potential concern, that they meet with those students separately. The reason why we ask that they meet with them separately is to give those students an opportunity to express their concerns in a safe space where they can be very honest and upfront with the RA, share their concerns, and that allows the RA to get all of the perspectives heard. The next step would then be to initiate a mediation with all of the students who are involved. So in some cases, this might just be 2 students. If the room has a greater capacity, there may be 3 or 4. But the purpose of this mediation is to give all of those students an open opportunity to communicate with each other about the nature of the concerns, how they're being impacted, and how they can move forward with a compromise. This compromise piece is really important because depending on the nature of the concern, there may be several paths to a solution, and so it'll be really important for all of the roommates to be actively engaged in finding that solution. It really won't be a case where the RA dictates what's happening or what that solution needs to look like, because the RA isn't necessarily living in that space with the students. We want the students to feel empowered. We want them to feel that their voices are heard, and so their active participation in a mediation will be really key to making sure that they can find a solution that everyone in the space can work with. I want to reiterate that our RAs are really trained to address a range of conflicts and emergencies, whether they're on call or not. And so realistically, they probably deal most with roommate conflicts and mediation. So they are very well trained, they're well versed in the issues that might arise for students. And so we really feel that they are a great tool and a great asset to your students as they navigate any conflict that might arise. Again, our mediation process aims to find a solution that will involve some kind of compromise, but we recognize that sometimes these conflicts are complex. So our resident directors are available and willing to intervene if necessary if we find that the roommate conflict hasn't been successfully resolved, or if after time the resolution isn't working for all of the students involved. And so we are definitely here to support the students in that situation. But by and large, most of the roommate conflicts that do arise are successfully resolved when the RA facilitates a mediation among those students.
And we would like to again reinforce that this is a process. Um, in the event that your student contacts you to discuss a problem that they are having, remember that if they are still in that moment, they are in a very, very emotionally charged state. They could be angry, they could be frustrated, they could be experiencing a number of different feelings. Give them space and time to, to share their frustrations and listen without trying to problem solve. It is important for both you and the student to understand that this is a process, and processes take time. Um, The steps that were described earlier can take place over a number of hours or even a number of days. And in addition to the process itself, it takes time to both make a change in behavior and to understand that a change in behavior has been made. Uh, Results will often not be experienced overnight, and it helps the student to understand that as they move forward with their roommates. As concerned parents, you should check in with your student to see how things are going and to understand how the process is playing out. And please, please help your student understand that the conflict resolution skills that they practice here over the course of their year, they will be using for the rest of their lives. They will use these resolution skills in group projects, in classes, with whoever they live with after college, in their jobs. For the rest of their lives, the skills that they develop here will come into play and make them more productive people overall.
All right, so we have just a final reminder that roommate mediation is a process. Anytime that conflict arises, we want to do our best to make sure that these are being addressed in person, and we have several support systems available for your student. We have staff who are available at the ready to help your students if they navigate these challenges, and we really want to reiterate that conflict is normal. We know that sending your student off to college or a new year of college, for those of you who are students who are juniors and seniors or transfer students, it is normal and it's okay, but your student will not have to navigate that conflict alone. We are available, we want to support them. We know that conflict in their living space can have a significant impact, but we want them to be able to thrive on a personal level as well as academically. And so the sooner that they reach out to our staff to help support them, the quicker they'll be able to find a resolution, and we can ensure that they are being able to focus on the things that are most important for them. We will shift gears a little bit and talk more tangibly about the move-in process. We mentioned earlier that sharing a space, many students for the first time, will mean compromise in terms of what they bring. So we wanted to talk more about what you should be thinking about as your student is packing and preparing to come to campus to move into their residence hall. So the first is pack light. They do not need to bring their entire room with them. We simply do not have the space. But they should think very critically about what they will need to feel most comfortable here as they make their adjustment. So thinking about the season, which is Maryland, and it will be hot and humid for a good portion of the first couple of months that they're here. So we want you to think about what they'll need to be comfortable. So that may mean, you know, their lighter clothing, shorts and things like that, but also some hoodies as the weather turns to get cooler. In terms of your packing, you definitely want to use boxes, bags, and totes, particularly things that they can reuse while they are here and things that you don't necessarily have to take back home with you. So anything that can do double duty in their residence hall space will be appreciated. Your room will come with a regular twin bed, so you can purchase regular twin linens for your bed. The bedrooms will also have a 5-drawer dresser, with the exception of Oakland and Leonardtown buildings 238 and 242, which will have 3-drawer dressers. There will also be a desk with a drawer and shelf, and a desk chair for each student. So any additional supplies that they may need in terms of their computer, pens and pencils and things like that, you'll certainly want them to have, but the rooms will be furnished. Again, storage space will be limited, so think about what is most critical to your student's success and what will make them feel comfortable, but also know that that space will be shared with another person. And so there will be 2 or 3 or 4 people who will need to make that space home. And so compromise will be important in terms of figuring out how to get what folks need in a way that doesn't impede other roommates' ability to come and go in that space. Your student will also have a wired data line for any computer or tech that they have. So we advise that you bring an Ethernet cord, but we also have a pretty robust wireless system available on campus. Your student will get information about that when they move in, but at the very least, we do recommend bringing an Ethernet cord to be able to use the wired internet. Depending on the space that you're in, you may wish to purchase a carpet, either for decorative or functional purposes. And so you'll get information about vendors that can provide carpets that are available to you when you come to check in. We mentioned again that the seasons will change while your student is here, so we really do recommend that you consider leaving winter clothes at home for now. Family weekend will be coming up, and that'll be a great opportunity for you to visit and check in on your student, but that's also a great opportunity to swap out any seasonal items that need to come from home or any summer items that can go back home. Additional information that is really important for your student, whether they are coming in for the first time or if they're transferring or returning for a new school year, and that is Fall Welcome. That is going to be 4 days of welcome events for campus, and it will host more than 30 events over these 4 days. So this is an opportunity for residents to get connected to their campus and their classmates in really fun and informative ways. So the Fall Welcome event schedule is going to be available at the website that you see at the top of the screen, which is www.reslife.umd.edu/fallwelcome. We also have a host of resources that are available to you over the time that you are preparing to bring your student. The first of which is our Resident Life website. That is reslife.umd.edu. You can read all about our residential program and activities we have available for students, but there's a wealth of information about how to prepare for coming to campus, including a list of items that are permitted and prohibited from the residence halls. Specifically, we have a page about our move-in process, so this will be very key in terms of providing logistics as you come into campus, and this is reslife.umd.edu/move-in/campus living. So that concludes the prepared portion of our webinar, but now you have the opportunity to ask questions and we'll be able to respond to those. So you can finish typing those into the chat board.
Thank you for spending time with us this afternoon. As we bring this webinar to a close, I'd like to remind everyone that a recording of this webinar will be available on the Terp Family YouTube page, as well as Resident Life. So if you'd like to rewatch this with another family member or share with your student, feel free to do so. You'll also receive an email this afternoon asking for feedback. So please let us know how we did, how we can improve on future webinars. We welcome your thoughts. Thank you so much and have a wonderful day.